once again, thanks to Lean Frontiers from both Gwen and I for you doing this. So Gwen, we had a discussion in September the 28th last year, it might have been 27th. We mapped out the connection between work standards and making them visual. And we talked about visual work standards. So we're going to go a bit further down that path today. So I think it was early December, we were talking about some other stuff related to visual thinking. And you said to me, and I wrote it down, so let me read it so I get the quote right. Visual thinking develops people, and people develop devices that express that thinking. So I want to start by drawing out a couple of things from that, what you said to me, because like a lot of things, you said it, I didn't listen properly, enough to write it down, I guess, and then it started to think about it and sink in. So I'm not sure it's sunk into me. So even if no one else benefits, I'm going to benefit from this answer, but I'm sure everyone will. So what do you mean by visual thinking? What do you mean by visual thinking, and how does it develop people?
Thank you. And thank you for the great question, but also thank you for inviting me back. I love our conversations, Oscar. You're such a intelligent, I suppose that sounds like an underhanded comment, but you're just so smart about
No, you can keep going. I don't mind if you keep going on that one.
And handsome and charming.
Yeah,
I've been meaning to say. But I'm thrilled to be here because really my conversations with you always help me think better. And I really appreciate that. I love your way and I love being here. And of course, I love talking about visual thinking.
Yeah, you are the best at that.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I've been able to do it as a career is because the field itself has been teaching me from the beginning. It didn't exist as a field when I started, but as I began to get into it, it was clear to me that there were concepts, there were fundamental concepts and anchor points and premises and principles that were large. And as I began to explore them, at the beginning, I wasn't thinking about visual thinking. I was thinking about the visual workplace. And I did it as an adaptation because I failed so miserably in the 1980s with 5S. I felt the power of the operator. I felt the power of the people who were doing the work, who were working with the content, the people in offices, the people at the machine, the people on the shop floor. I felt their power and resourcefulness, but I didn't know how to get to them. I didn't know how to get this into an expression that could be seen, could be visual. So it took me quite a while to come upon a declaration, which is visuality is about thinking. It's a language first. It is a mechanism for expressing. And what we're expressing on the business side of visuality is the vital information that is the work content or is the how of the work content. But that still didn't give me an engine that could be mobilized to trigger visual devices. Instead of just showing people a visual device and say, hey, can you use this one? How do you make that language generative so that the person is actually creating a vocabulary of visual devices? And the doorway to that I found to be two pieces. And I have prepared some slides so I can respond to this question rather clearly using them, and I'll show them in a moment. The two engines are the person themselves, what I call the I. Now, you may think I'm talking about the I because we're talking about visuality, but I'm talking about the personhood, the individual. You, Oscar, me, Gwendolyn, Skylar, as a person. And that person as a resource of thinking and invention. That I, what I come to call I-driven. And the other engine of visuality is the metric we use to discover the need for visuality. And that's called motion. Ono came up with motion. Taiichi Ono came up with motion way back in the 1960s. when he was trying to identify what was taking time and resources and not giving him anything back. He was a very aggressive leader, a very aggressive strategist, and he was always thinking about what was eating his lunch. Always, what was eating the lunch that we should have, but taking that resource away from us. And he named motion, moving without working. He named it because he saw a man one day at a machine, watching the machine work. And he said, wait a minute, the machine is working. The man is moving, but he's not doing any work. I have another waste, motion, moving without working. I capitalized that when I wrote on my first book. I was looking for a metric, and motion is the way that we dig into the work environment in order to see what's missing. Motion is a footprint of, this is what's really cool. Motion is a footprint of an invisible enemy. It is the only piece that we're able to see of this enemy. We move and we don't work because there are information deficits. Information deficits by definition are deficits. They're not there. Missing answers, missing information. And that
just on that point you just made then, it's almost missing information is a really, really tough one, isn't it? Because if it's not there, if it's missing, you're not going to see it's missing because you can't see something that's missing. So it's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it?
It is. It's a real paradox.
Yeah,
and what you have to look for, no, conundrum is absolutely the right word. What you have to look for is its footprint. Now, its gross footprint is cost. Its gross footprint is delays. Its gross footprint is struggle. But how do you capitalize on that, on the problem, and actually use it to turn it into a solution? Well, that's what a visual thinker does. A visual thinker knows. It's someone with the ability to recognize motion, the footprint, to see the footprint, and to back up and find the information deficit that triggered that footprint, and then to eliminate both through solutions that are visual. That is the definition of visual thinking. The ability of a person to recognize motion and the information deficits that trigger that motion and eliminate both through solutions that are visual. And that's how the thinking produces devices.
Sure.
So I don't want to,
so what you're saying, what I understood you to be saying there is, if we just consider visual workplace and visual management, then we're just seeing things. Whereas visual thinking is understanding and recognizing and then developing the ability to apply the thinking pattern that will create more and more and more and more.
Yes, it's really, it'll sound a little bit self-important if I say, but it's really brilliant. And I really consider it a gift that's been given in my life. I am not a brilliant person, but I do listen, and I listen. I do listen well. And this came floating down one night. I remember it was in 1994 when I was writing my first book, and I was looking for a way to dig in, and it came floating down, and I thought, this is it. So what's so beautiful about motion is that this person I identified before, this individual, has all they need in their hands, their feet, their mouth to find their own motion. It's their mouth that opens and asks a question. They're in motion. It's their mouth that opens and answers a question. They're in motion. They caught motion from someone else who asked the question. Sure. It's their legs that take them around their office, their machining center, looking for something that isn't there.
This question of how it develops people, then, I guess, how does it develop people? Does it empower them? What is the development?
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yes, thank you. This is what happens when a person creates visual devices, eye-driven. They answer the questions that are eating their lunch. And when those are visually answered in the form of visual devices, I have they get control of their corner of the world.
Yeah, right.
And when they get control, this is a little subtle, but it's what I observed. And God gave me, thank God, gave me the eyes to see what was happening, is that when people got control of their corner of the world, they relaxed. And when they relaxed, they grew.
Yeah, right.
It was exquisite because it was as though some space opened up inside of them, which
Yes.
is in fact necessary when we grow.
Yeah,
It's
right.
very hard to grow through adversity. We need a moment of rest just to let that little bit of space open up in us, and then we grow into that space. And that, of course, is continuous. So I've
Gwen,
never-
thinking
I've-
about
Go
the
ahead, please.
work
Go ahead.
standards thing, then what I heard you say then, I haven't sort of thought about this before. You know,
Mhm.
work standards traditionally are a pile of documents. What we're saying, therefore, if we can get people to start visually thinking in terms of their work standards, that's going to empower them to almost embed work standards within their own work environment. Is that
But
what? Is
yes,
that where we're heading?
that is exactly where we're heading. And you're called doorway number 2 in my model. And doorway number 2 is quite a passive doorway, but so important. There are so many companies that have been helped by TWI, by all the work you're doing, because they've realized that they needed to document what they were only talking about.
But
And
that may not be enough.
No, but it's such an
good start.
extraordinary beginning. No, it's extraordinary. The whole organization goes, oh, at last, I have what you said yesterday. I have it today. It's the same thing. I've got a work standard and I can do it. People come to work to be heroes. People come to work to master, to be excellent. They want to be excellent. One of these times we can have a session, you and I will tell you what I discovered about this built-in excellence. It's absolutely built into our brain function. We seek the next level. And when we're stopped, we get frustrated. When we are stopped, not from doing the work, but from excellence, we want to do the work well. So this doorway where the standards are documented and then they're made flat visuals, they're just visual indicators. They have no power at all.
No.
They have no control. They have no embeddedness. They're just telling you. Yep. But it's a big step forward, and never underestimate the contribution that this makes.
It's necessary step.
Really,
so perhaps you could show us. You've mentioned an example.
Information deficits. This is a workplace. All of these are corners of workplaces that don't speak. The information is there. You can't see it. Full of information deficits. Full of missing answers, and therefore full of motion. Okay, so that's a point that we covered. But all of these, I purposely pick these slides because they're neat and clean. If you're doing 5S, you're good 5S, you haven't gotten to the lines and the labels yet, but it's not madness. It's not a mess, but it's still a struggle for people working in this environment. There's so much information that is non-physical. And here's our definition. A visual work is populated by hundreds, even thousands of visual devices that are invented by a workforce that knows how to think visually. Here's the definition I mentioned before. Recognize motion and the information deficits that made that footprint but are invisible, and then get rid of both of them through solutions that are visual. It's like a big game hunting. This is the way we talk about it. It's kind of cute, but it's absolutely true. You track it down like a big game hunter, and it's exciting to find your motion. You become a scientist of motion. This is what we talk this way to executives and to operators. Become scientists of your own motion. Here's the definition of motion. Motion is moving without working. And here are its forms. They're so common. They're very similar to the 5S list. Only when we understand that this is continuous, counting again, and asking and interrupting, all of this is motion. And you know what? It's invisible. Anything you have to do that is not your work is motion. This is Raquel. It's the same thing. This is his need to know. This is his after, a workplace that speaks. So let's talk about the I in the what do I need to know. this system of thinking first,
Sure.
not solutions. People get very seduced by the visual devices. But if the thinking isn't there, you can't do it again. You can just copy somebody else's device.
Yeah.
But when you can actually look locally in your own environment and track down your motion and create visual devices that make those information deficits.
Guess what struck me is to be able to recognize those forms of motion, to be able to have that A minus B situation, you must be clear on your work standards. You must have standards in place to be able to identify we're not meeting those standards.
Not necessarily.
You've got to be able to create a gap. The gap's got to be identifiable based on something.
There are lots of companies that begin with standards, but stop there.
Yeah, right.
And they don't know where to go next. They just audit the standards and they begin to try to get people to comply to the standard. And it's not a generative position. It isn't a decision that will actually allow you to do iterations, to explore, to discover. That's the problem if you stop with written standards. You make them visual, as we discussed the last time, and I think we did a good job in showing how to make that translation.
Yep.
But the next step is to embed that information so that it becomes part of the landscape of work,
Sure.
part and parcel of the landscape of work. And that is the job of visuality. So we want a workplace that speaks, just as Ono says here. People don't come to Toyota to work, they come to think. We want a workplace that speaks, but people have to know how to find their vocabulary, how to express that, and how to embed it. That's the purpose of visuality. So, excuse me for interrupting you. I wanted to add that.
Oh, that's fine. So you were going to bring up a couple of examples. That was one of the questions. And by the way, Daniel King, thank you very much for submitting that question. It says, can you explain what is meant by need to know builds I-driven ownership? So I guess that's going to lead into.
We are
Daniel's
right
question.
in the middle of that now.
Thanks, Daniel.
So what I'm going, and this has to do with some of the other questions that were sent into you about the difference between methodology and a tool.
Sure.
What I'm about to show you is a powerful concept. This is not methodology. But lots of people who are listening right now will take this and run it for 4 or 5 months. And then they'll hit a wall. They won't be able to go any further, but they will take the first of the 2 driving questions. There are 2 driving questions that drive a visual workplace. This is concept, not methodology. The first is, what do I need to know? And when we look at that question, we notice some really interesting things. The arrows point in. That means that we are going to pull the information to us. When we see the motion, we turn it into a visual device that holds information, and then we pull it to us. That pink is a visual device that resulted from motion that we noticed, and we put the information in place, and we pull that information to us when and as we need it. This is so beautiful. Visuality is a pull system.
Yeah,
it's
good.
A pull system, and it is current and relevant. It isn't somebody else's idea about what I need to know. It's what I need to know. The I here is the difference. Visuality, especially in companies that are just beginning this journey, companies that don't yet have high performance work teams, it is I-driven, not team-driven.
Sure.
It is the individual saying, what do I need to know? This is not methodology, but it does trigger many, many visual devices. It's just that you can't really build layers on it. There are layers of function in visuality, and this is conceptual. It is powerful. So here's an example of I-driven visuality that just knocked my socks off. I was working with a heavy-duty trailer company in the Netherlands. Wonderful, vigorous, strong-minded Dutchmen, so smart. Men and women play 3-dimensional chess all the time. They're very smart people, very articulate. And we teach them how to think visually. We teach them about motion. And I come into this one day, I get to the plant around 6 in the morning to take a look around before we begin training at 7:30. And this is Jean's area and Victor's area. And I'm looking at this configuration, which is part of the methodology, laying down borders, laying down the visual where borders and addresses, if possible ID labels, is methodology. And I'm looking at this, the borders are down, there are no addresses. I'm trying to figure it out. I cannot figure out what's the big square and the little square. What's the big square and the little square? What the heck is this? This is an assembly welding area. And there's Victor and Jean. And I went to Victor and I said, Victor, I don't get it. Tell me, what the heck is this? He said, yeah, we're out of space here. We don't have enough space. So those are bogies, they're wheel assemblies. And he said, you see, the thing is, sometimes we have a lot. And sometimes we have a little. But we never have a lot and a little at the same time, so we can use the same space. I mean, that's beyond thinking. That's simply genius. Oh my God. They're building dimensionally the use of the floor based on content, based on time. They know their standards. They know what's coming, and they know they can use the same spot on the floor for two completely different work sequences. Where does this come from? It doesn't come from my teaching. I never showed them. I did show them double border function that was invented in 1996 by a guy named Gary. I did show them that. They adapted it into this, a double border function. So that's an example of thinking. Yes. The thinking is happening in the black box that we call the eye, the brain, the heart, the experience, the impressions. And people are committed to solving their struggle. They want their struggle to go away. They're using the methodology because they have a real need. That's an example, gentlemen.
Perfect.
This is a good example, I think.
Perfect.
So, out of the box.
Perfect. So Gwen, in the Lean Frontiers website, for advertising about this webinar, you used the airplane photo, or what I call the airplane photo.
Yes.
So
yes.
Can you tell us about that? Why did you use that photo, and what is that photo actually saying? And then I've got a couple other questions about that photo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Oscar, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I love that picture because with that blank slide, that plane's still got to get into that air bridge. So perhaps without what's coming, there's a document somewhere, there's a standard that some engineer has come up with in the design of that airport to allow that plane to get in to that air bridge. There's something that's in the background. But when that plane's there and the air bridge is there, that document is of no value whatsoever to the pilot who's driving the plane, in other words, doing the work, and the guy who's standing near the air bridge with the battens or whatever they use these days. So I'm really interested on you expanding on that thought,
yes.
that work standard is of no value right now to that pilot or the bloke with the battens.
And let's say that it is full of motion. This landscape is full of motion, accidents galore.
Yeah, imagine what would happen if they tried to align that plane up right now with that air bridge.
You can't go backwards.
Exactly.
There's no reverse on an airplane.
No.
You can't say, oh, I think I'll try that again. Oops.
Exactly.
A recipe for motion. Okay. So that's the before. This is the after, and the after is instructive. This is a visually competent work area. This is a work area that speaks. Should I go through it, or you want to talk about it?
No, you please.
Okay. Let's look at what's here. We have a flow line. This is lean. This is the critical path. Then we have a lot, and it's visual. Look, it's yellow outlined in black. In a field of color, the human eye will see yellow first. On a beige background, we have a nice outline to make it pop. We have a place to give us warning about the whirling turbines. We have a place for catering. We have a predetermined place for baggage handling, loading and unloading. And we also have this, which is such an interesting configuration. And it explains how precise you can build your standards in. And this picture was taken in 1998. And since then, there's been great steps forward, but this was the first time I ever saw information on the tarmac. it went for years, it went for decades. So to make things, go ahead, you answer the question, Oscar, so that somebody else's voice is cracking here.
No, it's fine. Keep going.
So
I mean,
how
what I
does it
see
work?
there is these. What I see there is that yellow line is speaking to the pilot, and that yellow line is saying, "Follow me."
Follow
And
me.
those cross lines are saying to the guy with the buttons, if it's
That's
a
right.
DC-10 or a 727 or whatever,
Yes,
stop here. So
that's
that
right.
document would have all that in it. But
That's
that
right.
document is, imagine if
That's
the
right.
person was standing there reading that document as all this was
That's
going
right.
on. It'd be a
That's right.
disaster. But now they don't have that because
That's right.
because visual thinking has transferred the
That's right.
standards, if you like, into something that speaks. It says,
That's
follow
right.
me, stop
That's
here, don't
exactly
stand
right.
there, do stand
That's
here.
exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly. So I have one more comment to make. We're going to go back to the before. This is more than motion. This is an economic factor in the whole community, because that plane cannot land on that tarmac. You'd have to pull out 50-foot staircase. And if that plane isn't there, we don't need the gate either. It changes the economic complexion of the terminal, of the community, of the entire region. It has a huge impact. When we look at this, we're capable of growing, because we can easily and smoothly take care, because of this embeddedness. And this, by the way, is simply the visual where. This is elevated 5S.
Now,
This is 5S. Go ahead,
you
please.
use that word embeddedness. What I understand, because you said it, a few years ago when we were first discussing this slide, many years ago, you said embeddedness. It means it becomes part of our work. Right. If it's done really well, it becomes completely ingrained, so it's part of our work. Can you just expand on that part of our work statement?
Yes, embeddedness means that the partnership between the human and the so-called inanimate workplace is complete. There is a conversation going on. And if, for example, the human still makes a mistake, still engages motion, because he or she is a visual thinker, she will refine that visuality so that her behavior by design aligns with what the visual devices are. The visual devices become the supervisor of the human, even though the human designed the devices. So it's a perfect partnership. It's in balance. I have made it so, and now I've made myself capable of repeatedly reaching that same level of excellence or completeness every single day. I have confidence in my work. And you know what happens? This is what we're talking about with control of my corner of the world. When I feel confident in my own ability and I'm able to hit that bing, bing, bing. And by the way, this is absolutely 100% true in high complexity, low volume, in very slow moving environments. You just have to be clever in a different way. Visuality works in all environments, because all environments are information based. It isn't just the flow of material, it's flow, period. And you can create flow by creating a visual workplace. And Ono said to us, flow where you can, pull where you must.
Sure.
So visuality is the basis. That embeddedness allows us to flow. We change, as seen here, we change our adjustments into settings. That's another way of conceptualizing.
No, just leave that slide, because I think the other thing that that to me really illustrates how well this works, and is that, just imagine at that airport they got a new air bridge, and if the air bridge was actually a little bit bigger or a bit longer, and the plane had to come in 1 foot further away, they could write emails, they could send memos or whatever you did back then. Be
careful, pay attention.
That's dangerous. To make that plane come in the right spot, all they have to do is scrub that yellow line out and move it to the left 1 foot. because the line is always saying, follow me. So when we adjust our standards to get the workplace to follow those adjusted standards, when it's truly visual,
Yes, excellent.
all you need to do is adjust your visuals. You don't need to send out emails and memos, which most people
Excellent.
ignore anyway.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
So that's when it's really speaking.
Excellent. And for those of you who are saying, well, you know, we're changing the flow, you're thinking in your mind, we change the flow a lot in our company. Yeah, well, great. As you get smarter, your borders will get smarter. Your visuals will get smarter. And before you begin visuality, you learn how to remove those borders and those visual devices quickly if they're in your floor. You figure out that formula so that you can do it overnight. And yet the borders will last for 18 months. That's our standard for borders. Yeah, it's very instructive.
We've got 4 minutes left.
Yes.
There was a couple of questions, one from Olga Alva, for example, and another from Javier Perez.
Good.
They were talking about engaging management and leadership in visual thinking. Can you? I know this is a big topic for you. You've got now 3 minutes. You've got 3 minutes to give us a quick overview on your thoughts on that.
Well, there are two
Sorry to put
aspects.
time pressure on you.
There are two aspects of that. Engaging management on one level means engaging management so they support a visual workplace elsewhere, not specifically for them, that they require a workplace that can think. Hey, let's adopt Ono's people come to our place not to work but to think. Let's adopt that as our next 2 or 3 year goal. That's our vision, that people come to think. So management has to commit to that or it doesn't happen, because it involves the resource of some money, but definitely lost production time. And you got to figure that out. Is it worth it? So that's one aspect of leadership related to visuality. But the other aspect related to visual leadership, or the principles and practices of visual leadership, is it's a different methodology. It's a methodology that is different, has the same principles as operators, but through the solutions that are correct for leadership. And the I is prominent in that. Actually, there's no way that I can say more without opening several terms of art that will just be confounding to people. What does she mean by that? So, but it is one of the doorways. So the doorways have to do with that. And you'll see doorway number 4. These doorways are segmentations of your work, your departments, your categories of work function. There's the operators, supervisors, engineers, supervisors, planners, executives. Okay, they're all segmented. There's your machine, there's your office, there's the macro environment, and there's your multi-sites. They each get a methodology.
Yeah, right.
A visual methodology. And so doorway number 4, we're talking about visual standards. And that's the good book up there in the upper right for explaining these 10 doorways, in case you're wondering. But this doorway is for senior leadership, and it includes metrics, visual problem solving, and the technologies of leadership, executive leadership and supervisory leadership. It's my next book. So in fact, I have to write 2 books in order to cover it. One for executives and one for supervisors.
Good luck. So over to you, Skylar. Thanks again, Skylar, Lean Frontiers, for hosting this. Gwen and I really appreciate it.
We really do. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. And thank you, Skylar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gwen and Oscar. Just a reminder, you will receive a link to view the recording within 24 to 48 hours. And as Oscar just said, I will send an email out to everybody that has Oscar's and Gwen's email in there. So if you do have any questions, you can reach out to them directly. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Gwen and Oscar. We will see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Skylar. Thanks, Gwen.